week of sessions that is being organized by ACA, Agence Culturelle Africaine. We have Aminata Johnson with us somewhere. She's the organizer of this event that is happening through the African Cinemas Pavilion within the Cannes Film Market. As you know, the Cannes Film Festival didn't happen this year, but the Cannes Film Market is still happening. This is part of the different initiatives that are happening with the Cannes Film Market. And this is one of the 5 or 6 roundtables that happened throughout the week. So we are thankful for this this honor. And today, the theme is something that hasn't been discussed yet over the last few days of the different roundtables that have happened. We will focus today on the economic aspects of African cinemas. I believe the other sessions were more on the policy front and on other issues, but there was nothing that would really address the question of economic sustainability of African cinema and production in general on the African continent. For some of you who may have read the short description, it was said that today is actually a very interesting time in African production, with the arrival of the likes of Netflix, but also other platforms, but mainly Netflix. We are seeing a renewed interest in African productions, not just on the African continent, but all over the world. There is now more notoriety for the films, for the actors, for the filmmakers, that are being more and more recognized and appreciated, and the audience seems to be growing both on the continent and outside the continent. For those who don't know me, I have started a film festival a few years ago called Nollywood Week that was focusing on Nigerian cinema. That festival started in 2013, and the idea was basically to share with the world what was going on in Nigeria that I found to be incredibly dynamic and interesting. Of course, Nigeria is not alone on the continent to represent this new voice. And we thought it would be interesting to dig a little deeper and look at the realities of this situation that is happening now with everything that seems to be going in the right direction. Do those things translate on the ground for actors, for the crews, everybody that is involved in producing content on the continent? So this session is to explore those things, and hopefully we will have an idea at the end of the session what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and what can be done, especially in this context of COVID-19 and post-COVID, in order to improve the sustainability and the economic returns for African filmmakers. So that being said, I will give a quick introduction to all the panelists that are here. We have 6 people here with us. I will start with Chike Nwoffiah, who's based in California. It is very early for you, sir, where you are. I'm very sorry to have woken you up like this, but if you can say a few words about what you do in California, and then we will keep the microphone going.
Well, thanks, Serge. I'll be quite brief, but thank you all, everyone. It's so wonderful to see over 80-something people on this call from all over the world. My name is Chike Nwoffiah. I was born in Nigeria, grew up there, and I've been in California for about 32 years. And first of all, was in corporate and all that. But primarily, I run the Silicon Valley African Film Festival that is in San Jose, California. This is our 11th season. And I started the film festival because, like most of us, as soon as you get out of the continent, you begin to encounter these very false narratives about Africa and Africans. There's just this reductionist mentality. There's all this warped sense of where we come from. And everything you see on television and film seems to kind of underscore that. And I know, coming from Nigeria and having had the privilege of traveling across the continent, that we have amazing storytellers, content creators that are telling the authentic African stories. And so I thought to create a platform for African filmmakers to come to Silicon Valley, the technology capital of the world, and share their stories and interface with the high-tech companies here. I'm honored to say that we've been able to do that successfully for 10 years. This is our 11th year. The 11th edition is coming up in October. And we're still going to have the festival, but it's going to be a virtual festival. And so that's primarily one of the things I do, amongst other things. I'm also an educator and so forth in African history. But I'm really, really delighted to be here to share a few things, whatever it is one has picked up along the way, with colleagues and friends. So thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Chike, for this introduction. TsiTsi, if you don't mind, we're now going to go to Southern Africa and to Zimbabwe more specifically. Can you say a few words about yourself? Oh, we can't hear. You have to unmute.
There we go. So thank you, Serge, and hello to everybody who's here joining us for this session. That's wonderful. We're now up to 93. My name is TsiTsi Dangarembga. I live in Harare, which is where I come from. I'm Zimbabwean. And what I'm doing at the moment is running a women's capacity building program on the continent, because I trained as a filmmaker in Germany back in the day and came back to work on the continent and in Zimbabwe and realized that there was not a lot of scope for women's storytelling on the continent, and the skills and capacities were quite low. So I've been doing a lot of development work. Currently, I'm working on projects with young ladies in Nigeria, several projects in Nigeria and in Rwanda, and a couple that are based in South Africa. And I'd just like to say thank you to you, Chike, because a couple of our productions have actually been to your festival.
All right. Thank you very much. We will have now Lydia, if you can say a few words, Lydia. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm here in New York City. I was born in France, originally from Guadeloupe in the Caribbean. And I am the co-founder of the Nova Frontier Film Festival. So we are in our third year now. The festival is really there to highlight stories and filmmakers from the African diaspora, the Middle East, and Latin America. My co-founder, Billy J. Frank, is from Grenada in the Caribbean. So the same thing, I want to go back to what Chike said earlier. Really, we both filmmakers, actually. I'm also an actor. And, the frustration of going to film festival and not seeing anything that represents you. So this is why we founded the film festival here in New York City, in Brooklyn, and to really bring those stories that people are not used to see from the African diaspora, really dismantle the ideas and the bias and the stereotype of, what we think African and the Middle Eastern and the Latin American are. And yes, I'm very excited to be with all of you today. I know some of my friends are logged in, so thank you for logging in. I'm in great company. I'm super excited. So yeah, let's start the conversation.
Okay, thank you very much, Lydia. Lebone, if we can hear from you, thank you. Your microphone, Lebone.
Cool, I'm unmuted, right?
Yes.
So, my name is Lebone Maema. I am a very humble scholar of African cinema that has, for about 15 years, really been doing research mostly around policy and the business of African cinema. I am at the moment trying to co-produce between multiple African countries, and I've played a guinea pig, in trying to navigate those waters. And I'm really keen to share my experience and to learn from the other participants on the panel how we can create and distribute more of our content together going forward. Yeah, I think for an introduction that should suffice. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lebone. Nodash, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Akindoju. I'm a Nigerian filmmaker, and I'm happy to be here. And I mean, what I'm working on at the moment, or what I'm particularly, like everybody here, I'm particularly interested in finding, telling stories that not just show events that happen in Africa, but explore those events from the perspective of Africans, like how we truly see events. So it's not just about events, it's how we really interpret them based on our cultural biases. That's really what I'm about. And I'm glad to be here. I think there's a lot to learn on this panel, and I can't wait for us to start. So.
All right. Thank you very much. Lala, if you can say a few words, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lala Akindoju. I'm an actor and a producer in Nigeria. I'm a Nigerian actor and producer. I am passionate about telling stories, telling the African story and letting the world hear about it, and telling these stories excellently. Excuse me. I'm very excited to be on this panel, and I'm looking forward to a very, very, very great conversation this afternoon.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we've heard from everybody, and actually, Lala.
You have not heard.
Sorry.
Hello. You have not heard from me.
Hello. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Fola Martins. I'm from. I'm speaking from Nigeria. I'm the chairman of Moderator Network. That is Nigerian chapter, what is an advocacy group for the arts. We have some filmmakers with us, as well as other artists, other genre of artists and all that. Yeah, it's good that we're looking at this, and I think it would be great to see what we can put on the table going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify, we will open up the floor later on in the conversation, but for now we will focus on the 6 participants that were on the poster, and then after that we will open up for questions, and the conversations will just be with all of us. Lala, I would like to start with you actually, as an actress, because like I tried to bring a bit of a landscape earlier of a film industry in Africa, in Nigeria, and in other countries that was expanding, and it would be interesting to see how much of that trickles down to actors like you. What I mean by that is that you're an actor, like you said. I know you're also now involved with production and even potentially at some point directing. But as an actor, I would like to dive right into the topic and talk about how sustainable it is for you to do your job without compromising yourself and basically live fully through your art.
I think being an actor is very difficult everywhere in the world. It's not just in Nigeria or in Africa. I think it's a very difficult profession, and it's a profession that takes a while before it starts being profitable financially. Now, Nigeria is more peculiar because our industry is still very young and still growing. And by that, I mean how to monetize the work that we do and monetizing the stories and all of that. So for example, in Nigeria, the royalty system is totally not functional at all. And it's very difficult for actors to earn long-term from work that they do. So even though there are many conversations in distribution and things are getting better with distribution, we're speaking about Netflix and all these things, the actors usually are the last to get the benefits of it, because the actors cannot negotiate long-term percentages. Only very few actors in Nigeria have started to negotiate these things, and those are the very, very huge stars. But even at that, it's few and far between. So it's really tough, because you find that an actor does one film, gets paid once, and that's it. but the producer can keep earning from that film for another 10 years or 15 years if the producer has that film properly distributed or that content properly distributed. So there definitely has to be better structure for actors, especially in Nigeria. I can speak very well about the system in Nigeria. It's not profitable. It's really tough to sustain a standard of living just from acting alone. It is why you find that actors have to do so many other things, especially in Nigeria. And even in these times, it's even been tougher. So yes, it's tough.
So you are saying that there is no incrementation system, for instance, meaning that if a movie ends up being a huge success, a blockbuster, what you earn as an actor is not going to improve over time. It's going to still remain the fee that you had.
More than likely. Now, for a particular production, if the negotiating power of that actor is strong, the actor can say, you know what, I'm going to take a pay cut now because I want a 0.01% back end from this film. That way, everybody has a stake in it, and even the actor works hard to make sure that the film does very well, maybe at the box office, and contributes their quota to making sure that the film sells whenever it's on any platform. But if that is not the case, and that happens in 10 out of 100 cases.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still there?
Yes, I am still here.
Okay. If that is not the case, the actor is unable to negotiate that. The money doesn't increase. If an actor is in a film that was very successful, when an actor is hired for another film, the actor might increase their fee because of their newly found success, but it's not that much. The difference is not that much. So these are the challenges. So it doesn't translate. So the success of the production doesn't translate in the actor's bank account. Okay. Not at all.
Okay, so that is an interesting point, and you mentioned that this is the case across Nigerian productions in general. Most productions. So I wanted to then ask Lebone, who is in South Africa, if the situation is similar there. Lebone, as a producer, I'm going to ask you to wear your producing hat and let us know if the situation is similar when it comes to the distribution of income when the film is produced. Lebone?
Yes, thank you, Serge. Okay. I was saying, if you allow me to put on my Pan-African scholar hat first before the producer hat, Serge, because I think that to just go back to what was your original premise question, to say, is African cinema profitable? And I think that if we don't answer that particular question as a starting point and we go into the individual disciplines, we may, lose a bit of substance to it. Because my principle is, in our definition of what African cinema is today, before we go into all of those details, there's such a broad definition of what African cinema is. And I have had the pleasure of working with 3 generations of African filmmakers, from the first generation in the 60s to TsiTsi's generation and even a younger generation. And we ask, is that what we call African cinema? Was that cinema of the 60s profitable? Is the cinema that came now 90s, 2000s, early African cinema, was that profitable? What kind of African cinema is profitable? So for me, I go back to the premise of saying, if African cinema was not profitable, we would not be in the business of producing this content today. So yes, there is a lot of revenue that is generated from African cinema. The question is, who generates that revenue from African cinema? I used to ask Osman Semben, Haile Gerima, the following generation, Abderrahman Sissoko, and say, who among you are millionaires? Who among you are billionaires as content creators? I still ask the same question of this particular generation. So without belaboring the point, I think that there's an opportunity that we still have to say, is what was the feature films of those 2 generations what we define as African cinema, and was it profitable? Or is the content that is going on Netflix today, the different kinds of genre still part of what we call African cinema, and is that profitable? So for me, with a South African perspective, I would say definitely African cinema or South African cinema is profitable. The question is who makes the money from that business? I'll leave the introduction at that stage and then open the discussion.
Okay, so South African films are profitable, but for who? Basically, that's the question you're asking. Well, hopefully we will be able to find the answer to that. I wanted to stay within Southern Africa and ask TsiTsi for her input, as she has been making films for quite a while now. What is the economic model of the films you've been making, TsiTsi, and how do you see the future and the opportunities in the present time of African production?
Thank you, Serge. That's a really interesting question for me, because in Zimbabwe, we don't actually have a film industry. It's very interesting. We have lots of people making films, and actually the quality of the films is getting better and better, but there's no industry in the sense that it's not organized. It's just individuals doing their thing. So that's the framework that I came to work in. And so the money that was available was generally from the donor community. So the films that were made were generally about these issues, you know, positing the African as the problem, the woman without rights, the youngster with HIV, et cetera, et cetera. And so after I worked in that model for a couple of years, I realized it wasn't really meant to benefit African film. What usually happened is you'd have some Western person getting all the money, being the producer and running the show. And generally African people were the trainees. I worked on those kinds of films as a trainee, although the expertise I was bringing was as good as anybody else's. And so the same thing applies about ownership, is that you don't get ownership, you get a trainee salary and that's it. So I realized that I had to change the model. And basically what I've been doing is I've been developing scripts. I've made calls on the continent, I've asked people for ideas, I've got good films, good potential films, and I've been working with young people on the continent. And the stories are absolutely fantastic. They're from all over. However, then getting the continent to invest in those ideas is one of the issues here. So I think really the stumbling block is that the people, the wealthy people on the continent are generally not willing to invest in film at the moment. And I think that has a lot to do with our upbringing. We were brought up to think of film as something frivolous that doesn't have any impact in real society. And yet it's really one of the things that determines how we think, how we see ourselves and who we are. So I think there's a need to educate wealthy Africans about the need to invest. And that's where Nollywood is a great example, because you have a sector, which is the Nollywood sector, which is the second employer after agriculture. And so I think a lot of education is needed. And this is where people like Lebone can help us, because they will listen to Labonair, but they won't listen to a filmmaker. You know, you've got to have made it big to be a filmmaker. So I really think a lot of education on the continent in different sectors, not just the creative sectors, is one of the things that we have to pay a lot of attention to.
Okay. Thank you very much, TsiTsi. I would like to hear now from Nodash, who to a great extent represents a different generation of filmmakers, a younger generation who is evolving in Nigeria in the context, like you said, where content has now been monetized. There's a box office that is growing on a daily basis. Of course, that's pre-COVID. Now things are changing on that aspect as well. But Nodash, you've been able to have your films in the cinema in Nigeria, even though it was a bit of a difficult situation, but you can expand on that. And then your film is also on Netflix. What do you consider if you have been able to think of the right model, the right economic model to make films in that context and to make a profit on that?
Actually, my thoughts are a combination of what Lebone and TsiTsi said. What I've found over the years, I mean, the way I see this is the Nigerian film industry, I mean, I can speak about that because that's where I'm in, has gone through a period of defining itself, you know what I mean? So there is no doubt that there is, well, profitability where we are, and there is, of course, a lot more money can be made. You know, the market is there. You know, Africa has a second largest continent in the world, and blah blah blah. The market is there, the demand is there, and it's growing by the day, and the supply is already getting better. People are making better films, right? And what I've found over the past decade is the margins have increased, right? In the past, we would have people make films for about maybe ₦1 million or 4 million naira, and that was it. You know, but now you hear you have been on productions where people are spending 60 million naira and getting, you know, some of their money back. You know, so what I see happening going forward is I don't know the exact model that will work, but I see that we're in the process of finding that model out. And I'm not sure anybody can confidently say they know what's going to work, you know, because everything is changing so fast now. You know, I don't think anybody can say this is what is going to work next year or in 10 years' time. But I feel confident because all the pieces are in place. We have filmmakers who are not going to quit and who have found a way to make enough profit to sustain making the film while they figure out the distribution part out. And then, of course, the demand is growing. Right now with, like you said earlier, globally, there's more acceptance for films, African films. Most importantly, we are beginning to get into the spaces we didn't get into before. And I'm not even talking about the diaspora. I'm talking about even within Africa. There were Africans who would not watch Nigerian films or African films. But now, because the film's getting better, they are beginning to engage. So I think that going forward, we don't have the model yet, but we're in a good position to figure it out. That's what I think. And I think, personally speaking, I've seen a lot more people who would never touch films. They've now started having conversations with filmmakers. You know, people would never even think of investing in film are beginning to, you know, call and say, let's have a conversation about it. Some of them are already investing in film. So I think we're on a journey, and I think we're in a good place, right? It can be better. So many things, like Lala said, a lot of things can be improved, but from we've moved a long way. We've come a long way where we started, and I can see us, you know, going fast to where we need to be.
Okay. In this, what we are talking about actually is the creation of an ecosystem, right? And to have a functioning ecosystem that makes sense and that is profitable for everybody. Everybody has a role to play, and right now I would like to focus with you, Chike, on the role that festivals can play in order to help create that sustainability of for filmmakers, because clearly the biggest festival of this world, I mean, everybody knows Cannes Film Festival, and since this is during the Cannes Film Market, we have to mention the role that a festival like Cannes plays for some of these American films or Asian films that then make it all over the world, really, and are real blockbusters and commercial success as well as artistic success. So what do you think, and what have you, what is your vision when it comes to your festival and the role to play within that ecosystem?
Well, thanks. And I just want to commend and salute the panelists that spoke before me. Lala, your point was, you know, you were quite on point when you were talking about the grading system that you have to, you know, you have to have star power in order to have the cachet to negotiate contracts and that kind of thing. And you see that. I've had the privilege since I run an African continental festival, and I travel across the continent and interact with filmmakers and see what's going on. Talent has never been our issue. Stories has never been an issue, because this is the bedrock and, you know, the birthplace of storytelling. So we have all those things. Back to your direct question about our and all that, but with respect to the film festivals and the role, we are here because of a film festival. And oftentimes people, when they look at film festivals, they think about transactional relationship. Okay, if I don't sell my film at this film festival, that film festival is of no use. If it wasn't within the framework of a film festival, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So there's so many things that a film festival brings to that ecosystem that ends up translating into a much more bigger conversation, bigger structures that helps the totality of the filmmaking process and then leads to eventual profitability. So these kinds of dialogue, these kinds of convening that film festivals are able to do and do it well, whether it be on local, regional, national, international spaces, add a lot of value to the process. That is one thing. Then the other thing too that oftentimes people don't recognize is that for a film festival like mine, for instance, we are centered at the really, our festival is in San Jose, the de facto capital of Silicon Valley. 5 minutes, 10 minutes from where we are is the world headquarters of Netflix. A walking distance from us is Adobe world headquarters. Your bike ride is Facebook. And these are human beings. These are people that work there. And these are friends, some of us, their children go to the same schools. So they come to our festival and you'll be surprised to hear some of them seeing films and saying, whoa, I didn't know that Africans make these types of films. Now, the value of that is not so much the transaction that is going to happen right on the spot, but the fact that these people get their lenses opened up to understanding the bigger ecosystem of African filmmaking and African storytelling. And next time when they happen to be in those boardrooms having a conversation, it becomes a different conversation. So there is so much value to what film festivals bring to the table that I will encourage our filmmakers to take it much more seriously and consider. It's not only when you win the awards, the fact that some of us are out here being your voices, being your ambassadors, telling the world your stories and showing the world and saying, come take a look, come take a second look, come take a third look at the types of stories that are coming out of the continent. Come see a different way of telling stories. Come see the richness of Africa and its people through the voices of the content creators themselves. There is so much value to that. And so I can go into the minutiae details of transactional relationships of, being able to strike a deal, being able to ink this and get investments and all of that. But I think those are more cliche and those we know. But I just wanted to highlight some of these nuanced things that, fora like this, film festivals like ours and the others bring to the table that sometimes are not amplified enough, I think. Because that's what we do. Every time we finish our film festival, I always get calls, can we talk more about this? Can we talk more about this filmmaker? Or filmmakers come on stage and talk about their journey. And in the lobby, somebody walks up to them and say, let's talk some more. And things begin to happen. But anyway, I just wanted to, highlight that. And I think as we continue our conversations, we can delve into some other aspects of things.
Thank you, Chike. Lydia, maybe that's a time for you to talk about Nova Frontier Festival, which I believe is a newer festival. So maybe you can explain also the specificities of that festival and why filmmakers should consider applying to your festival.
Well, I want to really join. Thank you, Chike, for what you just said. I really join you on that. I feel, the film festival is such a great, and as a filmmaker myself, I really believe that this is it's a really crucial part of the ecosystem that we're talking about. And actually, we just finished our third edition last week, which happened online, which was a virtual festival this year because of COVID, obviously. We usually have it at the Billie Holiday Theater in Brooklyn, but that was impossible to do. And we did continue to create this relationship because I think for us at Nova, because Billy and I are both filmmakers, it's important to create a relationship with the filmmakers, with the producers, and with the distribution. Because I think, most of our film, we are getting them from independent filmmakers, but we also are getting them from distributors. So the relationship with distributors are very important. So I think, but we're also trying with the filmmakers to create a relationship and continue this relationship, because it's not just about okay, your film is coming to my festival, and then, you know, you get an award, and then the story is over. It's like we're following the filmmakers. We want to know what is next for them. Some of our filmmakers actually are coming back to the festival with another film. That happens a lot. And really following them, highlighting them. This is our job. The film festival job is to really elevate those voices, highlight those voices. So it's really crucial and part of the ecosystem. We also have a lab. So our lab is really to train and form this future generation of filmmakers, right? So we teach filmmaking, we teach acting to the young, to the youth here in Brooklyn, but also we target the region in France of Marseille and all those regions to help to really grow. And I really want to join TsiTsi on what she said. Education is crucial, I think, in this, in order to create that ecosystem where we all have, you know, a responsibility in our different roles. So I really believe that the film festival is not just a platform where you screen your festival. It can go broader and wider, and it's also needed. We are here to really find those films. With BD, we always go and look for films. Where do we find our films? So we're lucky we have a lot of filmmakers contacting us, but we always look for those African films. Where are they? You know, who has them? You know, who are the distributors? Who are the producers? So I think also the role of the producer is really extended at that point. It's not just, okay, I'm going to make a film, I'm going to look for the money and, you know, put it out there. You know, film has such a long life. You know, the film has actually, we think it's a short life, but it's actually a long life where you can be showing it internationally. So the thing for us is to really, let's bring those films here on the other side of the Atlantic. Let's show them here. How do we do that? So we need help, and we need people who are willing to bring those films on this side of the Atlantic. So how do we do that? So I think also the sustainability happens there. It's like, what is the life of this film? Do you want this film to be shown only in Africa, or are you willing for this film to be shown internationally? So I think the film festival here, like Chike was, we want to show the films, but who are the people who are going to help us to find out about those films? You see what I mean? It's a lot of research, I think, as a filmmaker, founder, and as a programmer. It's a work of research. Where are those films?
Okay. Thank you, Lydia, for thank you for this. To get back to the question of sustainability, and I'll get back to you, Lebone, when you said that yes, it is profitable, but for who? I would like to get a little deeper on that, because South Africa is known to be one of the countries where, I mean, funding a film is always an issue anywhere in the world, right? It's always a difficult process. But in South Africa, there are so many things in place in terms of tax rebates and different grants that are accessible for filmmakers. I want to then, you know, understand a little more that model, and does it make it easier for the film to be sustainable, or not really? Can you please give us some information on that, Lebone?
Okay, no, thank you, Serge. I go back to definitions, Serge, right? And it's really important to deal with definitions first. South African cinema is not monolithic, right? There's different kinds of what you call cinema in South Africa. And today, I really would like us to not look at cinema in terms of the old format of a 90 to 1 to 2 hour film that is just for theatrical release. I really would like us to go into the space of the television content as well, to be able to assess what is the success and to speak numbers in particular.
Okay.
And to then say there is a large number of feature films that have been produced in South Africa that have not been profitable at all. And the filmmakers themselves are not able to then produce enough films to be able to create businesses. They find themselves going over and over again for a long period trying to produce content. Whereas what Lala was saying about the putting in the hard work, that is where I would say that South African filmmakers, South African policymakers in terms of government, right? South African private sector, South African distributors have for a long period of time worked together to try and create that ecosystem, to reduce the barriers of entry for the filmmaker, for the distributor. To be able to meet the objectives of government, the filmmaker had to produce a certain kind of content and to produce in a certain way. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it is not about an individual line function as the producer or the director or the studios being the ones that take the lead. It is exactly on trying to say, South Africa has spent, and we met with TsiTsi just as an example in 2006 when we were working on the African Film Summit, right? And we were trying to create policy to say, how can all the African countries work on the same model that South Africa was trying to establish then, where you would have a government that would provide rebates. So you've got two kinds of rebates that exist. You've got a co-production rebate that is intended to bring in co-productions into South Africa and incentivizes at 35%. You've got another co-production, another local production incentives from government that gives 50% of your total production budget to the filmmaker. And then you've got a network of South African distributors that it was a South African distributor that was able to close the deals with Netflix for the current content that is being distributed and has been picked up by Netflix. It was a South African distributor that had exclusive rights to Netflix. So I think all that I'm really alluding to is the fact that it takes a long period of time to be able to create this ecosystem. And although South Africa, and I'm answering the last part of the question, Serge, although South Africa can claim to be a success at a very macro level, there are numerous micro challenges that each and everyone across those disciplines, whether it is the actor, Lala spoke about collection of money. As a producer, we are still grappling with issues of copyright. So we are still, literally as we sit, going through the process of changing our copyright law so that we can own our content, our relationships with broadcasters. It is really trying to work on every element of the ecosystem so that the elements speak together, Serge. And I think that is what my response to you would be.
Okay, so if I to clarify in a way, you are saying that it is potentially easier in South Africa than in other African countries to produce content because you have the funding in place or the rebate, but also the broadcasters that are involved and that own then the IP. But it becomes more difficult for you as a filmmaker to own your IP and to basically make money off of the content that you have produced. Is that a good paraphrasing of what you said?
It is an excellent paraphrase, Serge, and I'll just close by saying this. All of this takes time, right? We learned from the examples of what was happening in Nigeria. And I can give examples in television, for example, where we saw what Nollywood was doing and how Nollywood was, changing the way that audiences were consuming their own content. And then we moved that same format of Nollywood and we moved it into television. We did not go into cinemas. We took all of that content, followed that Nollywood model, and we put it on television. As a result of that, you saw a large number of filmmakers then starting to produce content without necessarily having to be constrained into the four walls of a cinema. So there are different models, I think, that we're all trying out of very small budget to the large budget kind of films. But I think it would be wrong of me to say that it is easier in South Africa than in any other country. The truth is that it is just as difficult to produce. However, I think that there has been enough effort that has been put into creating this ecosystem, and the challenge is in making sure that this ecosystem is replicatable in Nigeria with those lessons and other parts of the continent.
Okay. I mean, I think it's very clear. TsiTsi, I think you wanted to add something to this. Don't forget to unmute.
Yeah, thank you, Serge, and thank you, Lebone, for all those points. I think one of the things that we need to look at about the success of the Nigerian industry is the economy of numbers that they have. They were able to have a domestic success that was economically viable even before they spread into the diaspora and all over the world. And so when we look at most of the other African countries, we don't have that economy of numbers. So it means we have to organize our industries differently. I am firmly convinced that most African countries will not be able to have viable industries on their own the way Nigeria did. If you look at East Africa, for example, there is a huge, very economically viable industry in Swahili movies made in the Kiswahili language. And that's a market of about 100 million people in 5, 6, 7, 8 countries. And I think that is an important model. The other aspect with this is that it requires some level of political cohesion. Because as Lebone was saying, South Africa has its infrastructure in place, all its systems, but you come to Zimbabwe to say, look, we need to build up this economy of numbers. Zimbabwe has got nothing in place at the level of policy. And so although we're not really talking about policy here, we cannot separate policy from economy. And so really we do need to be doing more lobbying at regional bodies. I don't think SADC, which is the regional body for the Southern African part of the continent, is involved in film at all. You know, we need to be talking at the AU. And when we talk, it shouldn't be in terms of the political aspects of film, which is to provide work for youth, which is what they've been talking about. But we have to talk about the storytelling, the fact that our stories are at the moment our only commodity that is unique to Africa. There is no other commodity that we have that is unique to us besides our stories. And so we've got to put a premium on that and really benefit from it. And we have to find the models that will enable that to happen. Using Nollywood, of course, but realizing where we have to change the model because it's not going to suit all the circumstances of all the African countries.
All right, thank you, TsiTsi. And that actually leads me to the Netflix question, because obviously Netflix was going to come up in this conversation. Netflix has now become the main provider, I want to say, for people in the diaspora. You know, before it used to be like there was no access for Nigerian films, for African, you know, there's a Zimbabwean film on Netflix now called Cook-Off. And I'm sure when Chike launched his festival, people would rush to the movies because they had no other ways except for taking a plane ticket to watch those films. And now Netflix has made that all possible. Which is great, obviously. But what does that mean, and what is the impact of Netflix's inroad in African content production? Like, can we? I don't know who wants to answer that one. This one is open. Maybe Lala?
Yes, I was going to respond to that, and I also wanted to say that in response to some of the points that have been raised on how the Nollywood system has worked, is that the advantage a country like South Africa has is, like Lebone said, the structure and the policies, which we're not very good at over here. The average Nigerian filmmaker raises the money for their films themselves, and I'm sure that Nodash will echo this as well. We don't have as much access to grants or to support to fund films. Over here, rich people and individuals are starting to believe in film and are starting to invest, which is where we're having to work on our business models and, you know, to do the numbers right. But even at that, we're a country with a huge population, but I can tell you that we don't have up to 50% of the Nigerian population spending money going to watch films. No, we don't have that yet. we still have most of the population watching films at home via DSTV, Africa Magic. That's where most people watch films in Nigeria. For the paid TV platforms, the VOD platforms that are streamed online, so now talking about Netflix, Iroko TV, those are the popular ones. More Nigerians in the diaspora watch that, because over here we're still dealing with issues around data and so many other technical things. But so that now opens us up to the diaspora. Now, to start to answer your question, Serge, Netflix coming in is great because it gives more room for our work to be seen outside Nigeria. So like you said, there's more notoriety, more people can see. We can change that narrative of what Africa looks like, of what African films are like. We can show that we're making films that can stand side by side with any other film in the world. I mean, Nodash has a great film, Delivery Boy, which showed at your festival, which anytime I ask anybody to watch it, they always wonder if it's really, really a Nollywood film. But the problem has been that they were not seeing the films. There was nowhere to see it. The distribution wasn't great where you could walk into a cinema abroad and watch a Nigerian film. Maybe some cinemas in London and maybe a few in South Africa. But even that, I remember I was part of a film, Potato Potato, and with the distribution, we showed in some cinemas in South Africa, but that wasn't even profitable. No money was really made, and that was an attempt to try to get films into more African countries. So I even feel like as a continent, more work needs to be done. But now that there is Netflix, more people are excited to stay at home and watch the films from home. I don't even know what that means for the future of cinema goers and the profit there is. That's also a question and a conversation to have. But more importantly is that there's also like a distribution plan that everybody can work with. So when you're making your film now, you can add in your business plan the possibility of getting your film on a platform like that. And then the profits can be calculated. And then you can say, okay, we're going to reach more people. So I think it's definitely great with them coming in and funding originals. So beyond just acquiring the content, Netflix is in South Africa and Nigeria funding originals. That's really good because now with the funding, we can now tell some of the stories we've only dreamt of. Stories that we wanted to tell but didn't have the funding for, or we wanted to tell and felt like the audience was not ready for. With a worldwide audience like Netflix, the storyteller, the filmmaker is not bound anymore. You can think, you can go for it. An actor can focus and say, you know what, I'm on this project for 6 months. My earnings are good and I don't need to jump around and I can give my best and I can earn better, and I can give better. So those are my thoughts.
Are we not, though, getting into the trap that Lebone was talking about with South Africa, in where when Netflix is going to produce content, but there's content, the content producer, the directors and the producers are not going to own the IP, it's going to belong to Netflix. I'm talking about the originals. Are we not going to now start going into another direction where, okay, you're going to be paid to make your film, but then after that, you have no say?
No, but I don't think so. If it's an original, just to quickly respond to that. If it's an original, what I would think is the filmmaker, you decide what you want to produce on that level. If there's the things you want to own, don't give it to Netflix as an original. Don't get paid for it, is what I would say for now. Don't give it to Netflix as an original. There are things that you can make it and then you can work a deal where there's acquisition and it's there for 1 year or 2 years and you can take your content back and still do whatever you want to do with your content. I think that's still an option so that the filmmaker still has some power. But when it's an original, it's definitely a collaboration and you're going to pitch an idea to them and they're going to say yes or no to that idea, which you're going to develop with them. So I think that then you both own the IP, you both own it. These are my thoughts.
Okay. I think TsiTsi wanted to say something and then after that we're going to go to Nodash and Chike as well.
Yes, I think the more players we have in the industry affecting the continent, the better. So clearly Netflix is a good thing in that respect. I don't know what kinds of contracts they do. I don't know how much money they pay out, for example, for the film that you mentioned, the Zimbabwean film. But where very little is happening, that's got to be a good thing. I think one of the big bonuses of Netflix, though, is that people are watching African content. So they're becoming familiar with African content. So the next time an African film is out there, people are not going to be thinking, oh, you know, what is this? What kind of story is this? So for me, that is the huge, huge benefit. It's going to help us to grow our industries and ironically also at home, because a lot of people will start seeing African films on Netflix, the better ones, even people on the continent. So for me, that is the biggest bonus. There are all these issues about ownership of IP and, you know, how the money is actually flowing and which people have access to Netflix. Those are all very contentious issues. You might find that it's certain people in certain countries, like in South Africa, it might be one enclave of the population. Here in Zimbabwe, it's likely to be politically connected people because those are the people who are in those circles. So those are other issues. But the fact that people are now seeing the content is paramount, it's priceless.
Okay. Nodash, you have quite a success story, almost like a fairy tale. If I'm allowed to mention some numbers, I think your film, The Delivery Boy, was made for $10,000 or less. And he ended up recuperating that money pretty quickly. And then on top of that, being picked up by Netflix. So can you tell us a bit about your own experience with that? And you also have done several festivals, including Nollywood Week, but other festivals around the world. Can you tell us, maybe you just found a new path to sustainability? I don't know. Can you enlighten us?
Well, I think obviously I agree with what TsiTsi and Lala have said, that I'm just speaking about this first really quickly, that there is definitely a positive to platforms like Netflix being in Nigeria, no doubt about that. But I don't think that their greatest contribution on long term is not going to be the films that they commissioned and stuff like that. I think it's going to be in the fact that they are showing a lot of people who did not believe that there is a profitability, that there is a business in film. And that's what I have seen. So there are a lot of people in Nigeria who can fund films for a long time. But now that you see an international brand like Netflix playing in that space, a lot of them are waking up to the fact that, wait, there's something happening here. These guys are here. It must be because there's something there. I think that is the real benefit we're going to get on the long term. That's going to be the major, I mean, the way I see it. That yes, we're going to tell some stories. We've been telling some stories. Some stories are being commissioned. More will be done. But on the long term, the greatest benefit I feel for the continent, two things. More people are interacting with the content. Now they're getting familiar with it. Now they're building a taste for it. And then it's also going to stimulate the investors we've been looking for within the continent or outside. And they now believe that if these guys are playing, the same thing that happened with telecoms in Nigeria. We had MTN in Nigeria. People were talking about telecoms for a while. Nobody wanted to play in that space. Then MTN came in. And then after that, Nigerian companies, right now, one of the biggest is a Nigerian-owned company. So it's what I think is going to happen on the long term. And I think that's also a good thing because we also can ignore the fact that there's an element of he who pays the piper dictates the tune. So as much as every platform gives you the liberty to tell a story, that liberty is still within certain brackets. Do you understand? You still have to dance to, their own tune and stuff like that. So that would influence the stories being told. Mm-hmm. Do you understand? And like Lala said, there might be stories that there might be stories you might not want to share with certain platforms, but there are also stories you might want to share, but that would not be accepted because it doesn't fit within the framework of what they have defined as what African stories should be like. Do you understand? But I think ultimately we're going to get past that. We're going to get into a space where more people, there will be more options. I think that's what the beauty is. And I think that as regards the business model, I agree with what everybody has said. Yes, right now, I don't think the approach for filmmakers should be, I make a film and my business model is completely based on putting this film on Netflix. I think that is dangerous. I think it should be one of the options. Do you understand? But we should always keep the other options open. And I think it inevitably it is what's going to happen. Because I was in Hollywood in January, and some of the people that I was talking to, they kept saying that, right, this was, I was at a festival in California also called the Pan-African Film Festival, and they premiered Sono there. And at the premiere, after the film, a lot of the discussion was about how a lot of other people are watching what Netflix is doing in Africa, and they are coming in. And I can speak to that. There are so many people who have approached my production company after seeing The Delivery Boy and all the work we've done. And they are not even in that space. You know, there are different people, individuals, groups, a lot of people playing that space. So that's what I think, that's where I think the new model is going to emerge. We're going to have more options, you know. I just don't know how quickly that is going to happen. You know, but I think that's where we're going to go.
Okay, thank you very much, Nodash. Chike, if you can take, I see you nodding, so I know.
Yeah, I think Nodash actually hit a lot of the points I wanted to make. Just some cautionary note, not so much to sound as a contrarian. I love the fact that, of course, Netflix is making its presence known in Africa and investing in regionals and all of that. And I think to Nodash's point, the extent to which that can help develop the ecosystem, particularly convince local investors, because, you know, that's typically, you know, when you don't appreciate your own thing and somebody else comes in and appreciates it, then it wakes you up. But I'm hoping that that transition happens really quickly, because Netflix is not a charity organization. And we as Africans need to realize that yes, we are jumping, doing cartwheels and spinning and clapping and doing all of that stuff, but Netflix is there to make money and it's business. But I'm also worried oftentimes when we have to sing and dance to a foreign gaze, particularly given our history of interaction with those that are so many degrees removed from our experiences as Africans. And we have to always have that at the back of our minds, because for far too long, our stories and context keeps being, you know, told by those that are so far removed from our realities and our experiences. And when they're coming with the money, whether it's under the gaze or guise of local origination programming or productions, we must also be aware of the fact that there are certain things that you're told to produce so that it can suit the international palette, so that it can get more clicks and get more eyes on it. So I'm hoping that as we engage and continue this engagement and interaction with Netflix, and a few others are going to be coming in because they're lining up now to come in, that we figure out a way as Africans to really embrace these engagements on our own terms. Because if we don't, and we play to this gallery of feeling validated, and that's the thing I'm seeing, the undercurrent of all of this stuff in language and conversations, is as if we are now being validated because Netflix is in Africa. We are now being validated as storytellers, content creators because of Netflix. And we need to make sure we understand the language we're using to describe what is happening, because that becomes who we really are. And when that happens, which I'm seeing, unfortunately, we're going to be in trouble. And we're going to be back here 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and our children are going to be talking about the same thing. Just like Lebone was saying, that the money is going to be there. Yes, you get paid, but the real money is the question. And but I'm also interested in the real voice. Whose voice is going to come through? Let's make sure that we safeguard that African voice in whatever way it is. And that's it, because to have your name as a producer doesn't necessarily mean that you have the voice. So as we engage, brothers and sisters, let's make sure that we don't fall into this trap of feeling validated by some foreign lenses, because that is never going to be authentic.
Okay, that's it almost sounds like a conclusion, Chike. And we almost have to wrap it up also and open it to questions from all the participants. We have been blessed with a great attendance. We have about 100 people in there, so I want to hear more voices and more questions from the audience. But in a way, to get back to your point, Chike, and to your point, Lebone, I feel like the conclusion of this discussion could be, and it's not necessarily a positive one, but it could be that the answer to the question is African cinema profitable? Yes, it is. It has been for quite some time now, but not necessarily for the people making the films, not necessarily for the people who should be benefiting from this growth. And so far, the people who have profited the most are what Chike just qualified as foreign entities, basically. So what does it take to change that? What does it take to change that course so that there is more ownership, not just of IP? I mean, IP is obviously critical to it, but of this success that is happening now. If this success slips away and becomes something that will not benefit African filmmakers, then where are we heading to? Anybody wants to answer that one? TsiTsi?
That's the key question. That's the key question, Serge. Can we really call it success if it isn't growing our own industry, if it's only another conduit? You know, we had African bodies taken out of the continent to create value elsewhere. We have African minerals taken out of the continent to create value elsewhere. Now we have our imagination taken out of the continent to create value elsewhere. So for me, the question is this really success? I wouldn't actually call it success. I would call it a step in the development of our industry. But what we have been talking about is key. What are the valid African stories and how do we benefit economically from them? The only way to do that is to have Africans financing. If you have Netflix financing, you're going to have to do it the Netflix way. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's not that we don't have extremely wealthy people. In Africa, we have them. There's no reason why we shouldn't have film funds and all sorts of things that can fund our films to the same tune as Netflix does, but we don't do it. And this is where we have to begin. We have to start setting up the structures that enable our industries to prosper.
TsiTsi, I really cannot agree with you more, but I'd like to go back to one particular context, and it's going back to this thing around the ecosystem and the principle of scaling up what we believe to have been a success, right? And I really believe that we need to learn from Europe. Europe as a bloc, yes, they've had their own issues, but I've really tried to study from a policy perspective, the marriage between policy economics and the creative industry. They managed to develop policy to support the other two. What we are always grappling with, and it comes out in this discussion as well, is that we'll focus and say economics, creative, but without finding that common space in between. And I'm going to argue for this. We make the same mistakes over and over again because we do not consider what has been done previously by generations before us. This process and this discussion that we're having now has been done, written, researched. There are bodies that are working towards creating this particular infrastructure that we're talking about. And I think that ours is to try and feed into creating that ecosystem. I will close that off by saying the European Convention on Cinematographic and Broadcast was a policy document that in as early as 2000 created the opportunity for Cannes Festival today to still be getting funding, for all of their institutions to be getting funding. We are still talking about our individual countries and our individual institutions. We are not speaking as a collective audience, as a collective policy. So Netflix will come to South Africa, do what they want. MultiChoice has done what they want in Nigeria, created only Nigerian content that's specifically for that audience with that particular language and not gone Pan-African at all in terms of their ethos. Netflix is doing exactly the same thing. So if we, and that's why I'm saying I agree with you, if we don't dictate what terms we want to be engaged with at a policy level and set up those institutions, we're going to be repeating the same mistakes over and over again. I don't want to belabor the point, there's a lot more I'd like to say, but I think really, I really believe in the marriage of the policy, the economics, and the cultural creativity. And that's why I'd like to input the most. Thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for what you said. I totally agree with what you said. I feel, this panel should not be, the title should not be, is the African cinema profitable? It's how do we make it profitable? You see what I mean? I think this unity needs to happen. Otherwise, like Lebone said, like TsiTsi said, other entities are going to come in and profit from this non-unity. You see what I mean? They're going to do that. They're going to continue doing that for years and years and years to come. So it's really about, and I think, let's look at what's happening in the world right now. Okay, I live in New York City. I'm in the heart of Brooklyn. Come on, guys. This is really happening. This is an opportunity to wake up, and sorry about my language, but to really wake up and unify. This is an opportunity for Africa, for the Black people to unify and create our own world, the way we want it, the way we want to make our film. Why are we always letting other people take advantage of that? I join TsiTsi on that. This is actually very annoying. Very annoying. Filmmakers are not making money, actors are not making money. How long does that gonna last? Seriously. So I think really there is a need for renaissance. Yes, there's some African country where it's starting to go well, but just imagine for a minute, how would that look like if all Africa united and created an ecosystem that works? This is the main problem. Where is the unity here? It's just countries. We're like talking. There's no unified system.
Thank you, Lydia. I'm going to give the.
I'm just being passionate here.
No problem. I'm going to let Lala speak, and then yes, Lala, go ahead.
I actually am on a different side of this conversation because yes, Africa needs to unite, but we've been having this Africa Unite. We've been singing this song for a long time. And it's not even in the hands of filmmakers like you and I, it's in the hands of the policymakers, people in government. Some of us need to even get into those spaces so that we can advocate for some of these policies and all of that. Now, whilst that is very valid and that is very important, I actually think that there is better structure coming into the industry because, like TsiTsi mentioned, she said wealthy people are not willing to give their money, but that's also because these wealthy people have not seen a business structure that works for their money. In Nigeria, there have been wealthy people that have given money to a film and presentations were made and the money was lost. And you can't tell that person to invest again. Now, somebody like Iroko TV and Netflix, they've created something that works financially, which is what Nodash was saying. There's a business plan that works. Now, I think that there are more pluses than minuses. So for example, the amount of labor that is hired on these productions is huge. A lot of independent filmmakers in Nigeria cannot afford to hire that size of manpower, which is supposed to be how it is done. So you find that you are doing a production and you have over 200 staff who are very well paid. I consider that to be a step in the right direction. I consider more things like that to be welcome. Now, in terms of our voice, I also think that's something that is relative in terms of our voice in the storytelling. To a degree, I don't think that if any filmmaker should allow themselves to be bullied into changing the voice of their stories for anybody or for any platform. The reason they have come to you is because there's something that you have. So changing your voice or changing your tone or tweaking the Africanness of your authenticity is going to be doing yourself a disservice. I think that it is even more time, a bigger opportunity for us to insist on the authenticity of our Africanness, of our voices, of our culture. And that's what, like, I know for us, that's what we're doing. We're like, finally, we're going to tell stories that are going to show our history, that are going to show our culture. And that's why we need to make sure that the right people are engaged to do this thing, to tell the story. So even if Netflix is coming to Nigeria, who are they talking to? You know, who are the people? And I think to a large degree they're trying, because I see a lot of local filmmakers are being engaged. But if the local filmmakers are not enlightened, they wouldn't know what to negotiate. But by all means, we can't water down our authenticity. I think that instead of us to be afraid of our authenticity being watered down, we need to be excited that now is the time to insist on our authenticity and tell our stories by ourselves. And we already have a world audience ready to see it.
Okay, that's a very, very clear point, Lala. Thank you. I will take a few questions from the audience. There are some people who are already raising their hands, so I'm going to allow them to speak, and then after that we will have to wrap it up. I think we already went beyond the time that was allowed for it, but it's okay. So I'm going to ask Timmy Richards. I don't know where you are exactly. There's also okay. Well, we'll ask. I'll be James. If you can ask a question now, then after that we'll go to Timmy Richards.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's been wonderful to listen to you all. Some of you I know, and you know I've been working in South Africa for a very long time to help transform that industry. And I'm talking to others, and we had a great time in the Berlin Africa Hub, and there are many important movements going on there. The question for this panel is African cinema profitable? And very good answers have been given to that question. In essence, the key things to me that matter are control. That control means producers who understand the business, who can support the creative people to create their stories and put them into the market in a way that's going to enable us to hold on to as much of the potential profit that can come out of it. The African system, because of the policy system, because of the existing broadcasters and DSTV, we managed to use that system to transform it from an apartheid organization, country, to one where the black voice was dominant. On the whole, as Lebone has been saying, using the Nollywood model, if you like, the soap opera version that has dominated television, the next stage is moving on into the mainstream of the cinema, both the popular as well as the art house. And there are filmmakers wanting to do both. And as long as we actually focus on what is needed for that, and we work together, let's deal with this competition thing and the unity thing. I think it's really important for us to work together as often as we possibly can to really understand what's going on, and really then to, in that support process, and that's not just within one country, it's actually within the diaspora, I think we can actually create something that's going to really go. So the question is, are we ready yet? Because I'm trying to create a lab to make this happen, and indeed, hopefully to announce it later this year, to work with various African filmmakers to move on to the next stage.
Okay, so are we ready now? Nodash, do you want to answer that question?
Well, the simple answer is yes, we're ready. We've been ready, but I'm not sure that, I think that answer is also too simple, right? Because there are a lot of factors that need to come in. And some of the things that have been discussed previously will affect my response. So for example, Lebone talked about policy. Critical, very important. Nobody can downplay the importance of policy. But what's the policy is only as good as implementation, isn't it? Right? You know, no matter how brilliant the policy document is, what matters is how it's implemented and the people who implement it. You understand? And that is why I feel that if people are in this space, we've seen a lot of policy documents recently, they're just not implemented. So, and I agree also that, yes, there's a need for unity, there's a need for, all of us coming together and stuff. But like Lala said, we've heard that for a long time, but if we're going to do it, then let's do it. But we have to find another way to do it, a way that actually works. So this is the time, of course, we are ready to do what needs to be done. But the problem hasn't been the readiness. The problem has been finding the way to do it in a sustainable way. A sustainable way to actually do these things. And that's where I think the conversation should be. I don't have all the answers to that question, but I think if we all keep thinking in that direction, we'll actually make some progress.
Okay. All right. Thank you, thank you, Nodash, for your answer. I'm looking for more questions from the audience. I was looking for more. I think I'm not finding. Achiro, was it? Did you have a question? No. Okay, sorry. Okay, there's one question here that I received by text. I'm going to read it out loud. One thing they do well, they are showing to everyone with money what can be done when money is possible. That the African movies can travel from one country to another, or at least raise an African audience across the border for African movies. So yeah, that's what we have been talking about with in respect to Netflix. But I think it has already been addressed, and Chike as well as Lebone and Nodash have mentioned that Netflix cannot be the only option for African filmmakers. It's a great addition, but to make it the only option would be a dangerous precedent. Is there more questions from the audience or?
Yeah, I've got a question. Can you hear me? I'm Sheila.
Yes, I can hear you, Sheila.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's been really, hi Albie. Lovely to see you in lockdown. Is there reliable data about how well films, African films or films of the diaspora are doing? Is there a place where one can go to see how profitable? Because when we talk about is the African film profitable, it's very difficult to know how to read that.
Okay, I believe there are multiple sources. There could be African films online. There's also the box office on the continent and outside of the continent, as more and more films are now released internationally. So there are different sources, different players that are involved, and of course, it is very difficult to have one answer for all of these platforms. But the premise of that question was to show that contrary to like what was happening 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, 10 years ago, or even more recently than that, we now are in a position or in a situation where African films are becoming more popular. And that's across the board. Even when you catch a plane, which is not that frequent these days because of COVID, but when you catch a plane, the entertainment that is provided to you on all airlines, do you have more African films than you had before? So it is a new period. It is definitely going in the right direction in terms of accessibility. And as Lebone and other people have said on this panel, clearly somebody is making money off of that. And the idea was to dig deeper into that and see again what profitability was there, and also if it trickled down all the way to everybody involved in production of films. But I believe Lebone wanted to say something, and then I'll give you the mic.
I wanted to congratulate Sheila on asking what I think is the crux question of this discussion around data and data compilation as a starting point, but also creating access to that data for multiple stakeholders in the industry. We've been speaking about convincing private sector to invest in our content, right? They're going to look for numbers. A most basic example of that need for information is a producer that is trying to convince an investor to say, I'm producing this Pan-African series, and they say, give me projections of where you would sell and how much you would sell. Just that process and the time that it takes to even convince a distributor whose job it is to give you that information. It is like, mining some very precious metal. It's a long, elaborate process. So I think that the process of creating that data for you to be able to know right now, what was the budget on Blood and Water versus the acquisition for another series, so that when you're putting that into your business plan, you actually have accurate figures. That is the information that I think needs to be accessible, even if it is at a fee. But the fact that it remains a secret creates a barrier of entry for a lot of people. So I think that needs to be particularly addressed in more detail, Serge. And I think that if there's a solution towards creating a platform where we are able to share that information, then we are really beginning to find solutions.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say really quickly, I know I've had my chance. I produced a film many years ago, a Black film that had a Jamaican theme. We were really disheartened when we went to a sales agent to get the numbers, the data on how this film would do. We had assumed when we were conceiving this project that Africa would be the obvious market for our film. It had Idris Elba in it, it had Kimani Marley, it had Shireen Anderson. When we went to the distributors and they ran the numbers round the world, they put a big fat 0 next to Africa, the whole continent, apart from, I think, South Africa. And we looked, my business partner and I were shocked. It was our first film with a budget of 3 million, and we were shocked. Why would they put 0? And their answer was, it's irrelevant because none of the box office receipts come back to us.
What year was this?
Now that was in, yes, I'll share that. That was actually in the 2002. We were raising the money. The film was made in 2003. In the end, I mean, the numbers that came back for our Black film was Japan. They put a 0 next to India. We asked, why have you put a 0 next to India? Because your leading lady is too dark.
Okay.
This is real conversations that we had. The Indian, do you not realize in Bollywood, all the leading ladies are fair-skinned? And I fought tooth and nail to keep my actress. I wanted her to be who she was. But that's, as a producer, this was the reality of what we were having to confront. Now, the film got made, the film is out there and it got released, but this is depressing. It's sobering when you go out there with your project, trying to compete on the real stage with everybody else, with your own voice and your own stories, and you're being told, well, we don't get back the receipts, your leading lady's too dark, it's not white enough, can you not change your actor? Can't she be white, can't he be white, can't he be white, can't everybody be white? I called it product bleaching. That was a term I used.
Yeah. All right, thank you for your contribution. It is definitely an issue that you are raising here, which is more along the lines of the acceptance of Black people globally. I know that other countries like China and Russia also have there are similar stories in those countries. I'm just going to give Moses Serugo. Moses Serugo had a question.
My name is Moses Serugo. I run an initiative called African Movie Night Kampala, Uganda's capital. It's essentially to get more Ugandans, more Africans demanding for African films at the cinema. But I'm curious to know from the panelists, how many of them have read Framing the Shot, that report by Dayo, I forget his second name, my laptop has gone off. And in asking that, I want their thoughts on, because he emphasizes Africa adopting the Chinese model of building more cinema houses so that people can go and watch our films there. And then the demographic dividend. The fact that Africa has very many young people, and it's important that they get to own the narrative of the African story, but also have that as the commodity to contribute to the rest of the world. But they can only do that by watching films from and about the continent. So I'm curious to know the thoughts of the panelists, especially if they've read Dayo's report, Framing the Shot.
Okay. Okay, I couldn't really hear everything in your question. But
sorry.
But if you could hear...
Let me try and respond to the question about the report, because I think one of the big elements of the question was if any of the panelists had read the recent Africa Cinema report that was co-funded by the Goethe Institute, I think, if I'm correct, Moses, which is a report that particularly claims that there is $2 billion that is left on the table by African filmmakers for not exploring their immediate audience on the continent. So there is $2 billion that does not get back into the African film industry. And he then, in that report, proposes various mechanisms to be able to get that $2 billion translated into actual, cash, direct investment. So some of the suggestions that come out of that report are, yes, do what Nollywood did, learn from what China did, but without belaboring the point, it needs to be deconstructed itself as a report, because proposing that we still go and build more cinemas on the African continent today is an archaic idea. We cannot be going and building brick and mortar buildings all over the place when we are moving into a fully technologically advanced world that is completely digital, where we see the proliferation of this kind of instrument into people's lives, and we still believe that we want to go into the old school, look at how the world changed over the last 3 months. So I'm just saying to Moses, yes, personally, I've had a look at the report. I think there's a lot of great suggestions in the report, but I think that, yeah, we still need to go beyond some of the solutions that are proposed there and go into more the fourth industrial revolution kind of solutions.
Thank you, Lebone. We will take the last few questions, one from Ola Cole, and then after that, I'll be James, and we will have to wrap up with a last word from the panelists.
Hello, my name is Ola Yemeka Cole. Thank you very much to the panel and also to the chats I'm seeing here at the moment. I'm a producer of a film, Ali's Comeback, which chronicles the return to the ring of Muhammad Ali and has an all-star cast, including Evander Holyfield and others. I'm extremely encouraged to hear what I'm hearing today, and I'm also noticing that people are sharing their email addresses in the chat. Perhaps if we could collate all our email addresses together and form our own offline African film network, and we can build on this, because talking is one thing, and there's a saying goes, talking without results is cheap entertainment, quite frankly. So why don't we actually just build offline with our email addresses and form our own African film network? This time next year at the Cannes Film Market, we should be able to present something that says that Africa's here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for this suggestion. I think that's definitely something that can be done. I think Aminata from ACA, Agence Culturelle Africaine, that is the host of this session, is going to talk about that to close this session. And I think it's definitely something that we can do. And the interaction on this session has been wonderful. And I think it would be a shame not to pursue this conversation.
Thank you so much.
I will now give the, I'll be James, please, for a last question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. I agree with that last suggestion very strongly. When we took our delegation from the BFI in London, our Black filmmakers to the Berlinale, it was the first time that many of us had actually met. And my gosh, we had a good time, and we're now continuing because we need to work together. We want to work together. So the more opportunity that we can create for us to find one another and see how many common ideas we have is important. But the key thing I want to raise is we think, again, going back to the core of your idea and about profitability. There was a report produced earlier this year in the UK to do with how much independent producers generally, what is the average income? It was less than £6,000 a year. And the reality is that's profit, because most of us don't make profit. Most of us have businesses, we pay with dividends, or we sole traders, working with writers, working on one project, move on. Eventually that project may happen. Eventually, if it happens, it goes into production and distribution and screens. And most of the films don't make, quote, the profit that gives the return, which is really why most producers don't make enough money. We survive in this business. And the key question and the way we're looking at it policy-wise, the kind of issues that Lebone keeps on asking or mentioning, is that how do we change this? And we partly changed that through having a lockbox. So if our film, our project does indeed make some money, more than after everyone's recouped, it goes into a locked box, and we can have use of that money to finance development for future projects. And there are various other things going on right now to make it easier and more viable for producers to grow. There are two other things about this. A lot of the producers feel that in order to be viable, you either have to, ideally, you should have at least one TV project, which is a returning series. If it's high end, then you're really in the money, all right? It could be lower end than that. You're not making so much on every episode, but that brings you enough money to cover your overheads. And therefore you can then focus on the individual films as well, without it bringing the money until, and we all know how long it takes to finance independent film. So we do this because we have a passion for it. What I therefore think we are needing to communicate to one another is different stages we can actually have in supporting filmmakers in different countries. So I'm speaking to various people in Nigeria now, in Ethiopia, obviously South Africa, I'm really very much part of it. There are people in Rwanda and elsewhere. What needs to happen to make us move forward? Chike said, we talk about this thing, is it time now? What we're talking about now, what I'm talking about now, is some countries getting their industry, their funding agency, if they have one, to back certain filmmakers to go to the next stage so they can actually go and make a killing in this market through creating something which is indeed going to create the kind of profit we need to finance future work. And that's us, essentially what it's about, but at the same time being true to oneself, telling the stories really want to do without the interference from someone who wants to push us on another line. And that is how I would like to end this. It's really not a question, it's more a statement about what I've heard from this to assert this is what we need to do as a group of people who care about ourselves, our histories, and to grab this opportunity we now have through Black Lives Matter to make people put in place anti-racist policies that are going to deal with the realities of our lives. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much for this contribution, Albie. Yeah, it's a deserved applause. I will give Chike the opportunity to speak now, as he's late for a meeting, I believe, and then we will all have a last word. All the panelists have a last word before we can wrap it up. Chike.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, Albie James, for that incredible comment. Olakol, thank you so much for calling that we continue this conversation and make sure that this is translated into action. My colleagues and I here in California, and I love the fact that we are talking not just about the African continent as defined by geography, but Africans, in my opinion, across the globe, because we all know that if we all get together as Africans, we don't even need anybody's validation. And there's enough money within our own systems that we can make things work. And yes, let's embrace what's happening. Let's embrace what Netflix is bringing. Like Nodash mentioned, like Lala mentioned, that, you know, it's not a fight. It's a question of making sure that we keep behind our minds and understand that our true voices, our true stories have to keep pushing forward, use whatever investment that they're bringing in to develop our own systems and develop our own value chain, if you will, our camera operators, our directors of photography, our, you know, all the people that work within the film industry. This can be a way for them to also learn and grow. But I keep saying that I hope soon enough we can begin to control pretty much everything, point to point of the value chain. One of the things that we are talking about with respect to diaspora is some of colleagues of mine are beginning to put together a venture fund of sort that will really be focused solely on the African continent. And that's also where both within the continent, those that have the money and those outside the continent can begin to put together these funding packages where we can come into the continent and work with filmmakers and finance 3, 4, 5 films all at the same time, just like the venture capitalists do. And knowing that 4 of them will fail in the technical sense of the word, but it just takes one person, one film to make it. And I think that mentality is I'm beginning to see that, and the venture fund that we're putting together is going to be addressing a lot of that as well. And so it's been an honor and a privilege to share space with these brilliant minds. It's been incredibly beautiful to be in this space where we are discussing our stories, our lenses. So I thank all of you, and I look forward to continuing our collaborations. And I apologize, I have to really dash because I'm hosting another meeting that started 14 minutes ago, and they are going nuts that I'm not there. So thank you all. And
you have our permission, Chike, and thank you very much. Thank you for your participation. Thank you. Lydia, if you want to have a last word, please.
Are you sure? No, I'm joking. No, I really join Chike on everything that he said. I think, what's important now is what do we do from here? What do we do from now? And really, for me, I insist on creating unity. I think the more we unify, the more we can make, things happen. So I really appreciate the discussion today. Just to respond a little bit to Lala, I totally agree on the Netflix coming in and, really contributing. I just think that, it's important that, we keep our voices and we make sure that we tell our stories. Just to just add a little bit about the Nova, because I didn't really specify, our themes for the festival are immigration, identity, and social justice. So this is the kind of film we're looking for the festival. So we are very specific for the films that we want to show. And we're looking for really real stories, independent film. We're not streaming any mainstream films. We are all about independent films. So we really here to elevate the independent filmmakers and producers. And I really hope that I really think this is a great opportunity. Thank you so much for putting this panel together. I think this is the start of something really great. So I hope that from today we can create something that is really significant for the African film industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you very much. Lebone, if you want to say a last word. Oh, your microphone.
I think I'll echo everyone's sentiment in thanking the panel and the people that participated. And my parting shot, Serge, would be to say, I repeat the sentiment that in 2006, we met as 100 African filmmakers of multiple generations in South Africa. We really convinced our African governments at the time to support us. And believe you me, only last year was this organization that we were trying to set up as our unifier. And it is called the AACC. It's the African Audiovisual and Cinema Commission, which, if you look at what is the National Film and Video Foundation in South Africa, and the institution that has led to this success, the AACC is a NFVF at the African Union level. It is an institution that is supposed to develop, monitor, and fund policy. And that's the starting point, Serge. What needs to happen right now, I close on this. Every one of the people that are sitting here today need to go back to their governments to request their governments to ratify the statutes of this institution. Some of us have been working on this, like I said, for over 15 years. All that needs to happen for these kinds of institutions to be created right now is that our heads of state need to ratify the statutes of this institution, and we are lobbying the government in South Africa, and we are asking every filmmaker to lobby their national governments to make sure that the statutes of this commission are ratified, and we can have our own institutions to regulate and fund us. That's my closing point. Thank you very much, Serge.
Thank you. And Nodash, if you can have your last word now.
Yeah. For a insightful panel. I've learned a lot from the panel, and I hope I've been able to contribute to center too. But the final thing I would say is, like I said earlier, I'll just repeat it, that what matters is what we do next. There have been many forums where Africans gather and we talk about things that are, you know, we speak very passionately about stuff, but what matters is what we do next. And that shouldn't be a theoretical question, I think. You know, for each one of us, we just made a mental note that I'm going to reach out to two people here and say, what are we going to do? I mean, personally, I'm going to reach out to Lebone and be like, okay, I hear what you're saying. What do we do next? I mean, what's the roadmap you have used? How can we replicate it? And if everybody can do that, I think it would make a lot of, because this shouldn't just be another, you know, another forum where we talk. We should actually do something now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we will conclude with you, Lala.
This has really been an insightful session. I'm very excited about it. I'm excited about the passion, and I really hope that we do something just like Olako suggested. The time is now. I think that I know that cinema and storytelling in Africa is profitable. We need to find how to make this money, earn the profit. Storytellers need to be happy, actors need to be happy, and Africa needs to unite now more than ever. Let's make it happen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. It has been a wonderful session, like I said. We've had great participation from everybody from the panel, but also from the audience. So I want to do silent clap for you guys. You guys were really wonderful. And also I will bring in Aminata Johnson, who is the founder of ACA, the Agence Culturelle Africaine, who put this together as well, and who is intending to be there forever at the Cannes Film Market. Every year you will see this face, and she will make sure that Africa connects with Africa, and Africa connects with the rest of the world. Aminata, do you want to say the last word?
Je te rappelle. Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm Aminata, founder of this pavilion of African cinemas. And first of all, I'm very sorry for my English. And I'm very happy to welcome you to our pavilion. This last panel, followed by many participants, further strengthens us in the idea that we must exchange all together regularly to stay connected and informed, share our experience so as to move together on the path of creating an industry film in Africa, a modern and Pan-African industry, including producers, directors, screenwriters, actors, but also technical infrastructure such as dubbing studios, laboratories, etc. We will work on it and have a chance of succeeding together if we remain united. Thank you very much, and I'll see you at Cannes next year, all together on a united African pavilion with all Agency Cultural African team. And I promise my English will be better next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aminata. All right, thank you. I don't know if when I disconnect, some of you can stay. I mean, we have a lot of emails to collect and all of that, so I will see with the person in charge of, with the technician basically, how we do to retrieve all of these elements, and so that, as it has been said by Nodash and especially Olako, we can take this as a stepping stool to more actions together.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Nice meeting you.
Thank
you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Merci, Serge. Thank you.